HACERA is a company that basically builds a framework on top of blockchains. So what led me to it was that people are working on different blockchains. It was the Bitcoin blockchain and then the Ethereum blockchain, and then later on we started realizing that people try to put data on top of a blockchain, and they had a lot of regulatory constraints in terms of privacy, who can see what, who can do what, who can access a network, who can join a network, how can you revoke somebody's rights if they misbehave. And the problem was that there are so many different blockchains, and we said, okay, why don't we sit on top of it? And then we're going to build a framework that can work with different blockchains. Wow. So when you build an application, you work with one API or a set of rules, and then you can always change how you want to deploy your application. If you're looking at supply chain, you have boats and ships and sensors, and try to get everything connected with a lot of data and a lot of regulatory constraints. It's not that easy. So we were thinking, how can we help in terms of using a lot of crypto, a lot of the new technology, but try to make it very easy for people to collaborate. I'm actually an applied cryptographer. I've done computer science for many years. I'm an applied mathematician, so I spent something like 10 years doing crypto and then another 10 years almost doing finance. I was in the city of London, Barclays Capital, Standard & Poor's, Goldman Sachs. And at some point I realized, look, we can combine that. Like, we do a lot of nice stuff in finance, but we need to open up to the world. So how can we combine crypto and finance? It's kind of crypto finance. So we worked on a Bitcoin stack back in the day, before Ethereum was even launched. And then when Ethereum came up, we started working with Ethereum. Actually, I helped to create the first Ethereum kind of project at Stanford when I worked with Dan Bonet on building a class, teaching students how to use Ethereum when it just started. I was working at some point for IBM Research, working on membership services and who can access what and how do we look at permissioning in a way that is easy for people to use. And then contributed more and more to the Hyperledger Fabric, became a maintainer and nominated. Today, actually like a few months ago, I was the official release manager of Hyperledger Fabric. And now sitting on the TSC, on the technical steering committee of Hyperledger, just by contributing code. My passion is to try to see stuff that is using real data, real users, real use cases, instead of just looking at the blockchain as the next big thing, but to really try to work out all the stuff that people need in terms of if you want to do finance, if you are in healthcare, if you're looking at supply chain management, IoTs, there are so many challenges that are nice technically, but it's really nice to see it from the business side. So the passion is kind of to work with the business, understand what they need, and try to bring kind of the cool technology there to the use cases. I think the future is going to be when we are going to have a lot of trusted execution environments where I'm going to have, just like today, nobody is thinking of hosting their own web server. You know, you go and you host it somewhere else. I think the blockchain is going to be an infrastructure on top of which we will have to be able to do a lot of stuff in terms of like trust, connecting, voting, anything that you need auditing that is going to be in the public. But what we're going to see in the terms of like the logic itself, the smart contracts, I think are actually going to be simpler and simpler, and the logic is going to be a lot more clear. So if I want to buy an option or a stock or anything that is conditional, that has some logic, I would like to be able to know what I'm buying into. And instead of me trusting someone because we had a PDF that we exchange via email, and then if they misbehave, I go to my lawyer, I'll be able to actually buy into that contract knowing what it's going to do and trust the environment when it's running on. And then it's going to be very clear for everybody in terms of transparency. And I think we're going to have less friction going forward. So the future is going to be a lot more frictionless. I think the future is going to be a lot more fast, and we'll have a lot more auditing. So maybe as a side note, people are so worried about regulations, and I always argue that your best friend in an enterprise, in financial environments, is actually your compliance department, because they are the ones that will help you launch stuff and go to production while meeting all the rules. It's kind of the regulator's kind of best dream to have everything auditable, everything in the public, and then to understand what's going on. So I think we're going to be working in a lot more transparent environment. Things are going to move faster. We're going to have a lot more connectivity. And what we are going to see is less friction in terms of like payment, value transfer, and any data exchange is going to be a lot more permissioned. So we have to be careful about how we publish information, because yes, it is sensitive, but at the same time we should be able to use the fact that I did something at a specific time that I can prove that this was my quote or my request or my approval. So all this process needs to come actually from the business process itself, and then use the blockchain and the smart contract just to apply the logic and to implement it in a way that does make sense to you.